Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, so today we are diving into a really fascinating garden diary entry. What we've got here is a delightful, honestly kind of specific record from May 16th, 2026, written by an author named Ang. Now, on the surface, this looks like just a quick update about a charming little plant called the Lavender Sorrel, or if we want to get fancy, Oxalis Barrelieri. But as we dig through Ang's notes, we actually uncover this surprisingly rich story. It's a story about time, about observation, and believe it or not, how modern technology is completely changing one of our most ancient hobbies.
To really get to the heart of the source material, we gotta look at the exact words Ang uses. The author notes that this lavender sorrel was collected from the wild so many moons ago. I just absolutely love that phrasing, right? It immediately sets this deeply personal, almost whimsical tone for the whole gardening journey. This isn't just some plant they picked up at the local hardware store yesterday. No, this is a living thing with a real history, deeply tied to a past memory of wild collection, and it's just been quietly existing in Ang's care for a very, very long time. And honestly, that long passage of time leads us perfectly into the rather incredible narrative arc we're going to take together today. We're tracking the path of this single plant. We'll start all the way back at its wild roots and this long-awaited bloom. Then, we'll actually zoom in, like literally zoom in, on the distinctive anatomy of its leaves that Ang finds so captivating. And finally, the best part, we are going to see how those exact leaves trigger an unexpected conversation about training artificial intelligence. It's just a fantastic progression, right? Going straight from the dirt in a backyard to the cutting edge of digital identification.
Section 1. The Lavender Sorrel returns, blooming after a wild start.
So the whole catalyst for Ang's diary entry on this particular day is this wonderful moment of quiet triumph. The lavender sorrel has finally bloomed again. The author explicitly reflects on this as just one more chapter in a really long-running narrative, even referencing a much older part 491 of their gardening notes. It's a fantastic reminder that, hey, patience pays off. That long wait for a new bloom, that's just a core part of the gardener's experience. Ang didn't force this to happen. They simply waited for the plant to be ready to show off its colors once more.
Section 2. Trifoliate foliage. Anatomy of a beauty.
Now, what's really interesting here is how Ang's focus completely shifts. Because while the bloom is what triggered the diary entry in the first place, Ang is quick to point out that the foliage is the real star of the show. The text describes these leaves as trifoliate, which simply means they're grouped in threes. And the shape of those individual leaves? They are ovate, meaning they're basically perfectly egg-shaped. So when you try to visualize this plant in your head, don't just picture the little flower. Picture these distinct, beautiful clusters of 3 egg-shaped leaves.
Section 3. Low-effort cultivation, the lazy gardener's guide.
You might think that a plant with such specific botanical traits would require this intense, highly technical care regimen. But Ang offers a wonderfully refreshing counterpoint to all that. Actually, Ang's approach is brilliantly simple, merely transplanting it to a larger pot and letting nature take its course. I think pretty much every gardener out there can appreciate the relatable humor of this low-effort technique. Ang openly admits to not paying much attention to the plant at all. By just giving it a little bit more room to stretch out in a bigger pot, nature did all the heavy lifting. And hey, it clearly worked because the plant is absolutely thriving.
Section 4. Strategies for propagation. 3 paths to multiply your sorrel.
Okay, so let's look at how this builds into the future of Ang's garden. Because the plant is doing so well, Ang is thinking about how to propagate it, basically how to grow a much larger collection, and the text outlines 3 distinct paths for us. First step is harvesting seeds, which just requires waiting around for the current flowers to be spent. Second, using cuttings, which Ang notes works just as well. But look at this third option, self-seeding. While Ang says this works for most species in their collection, there's a major drawback we need to highlight. When you let plants self-seed, they all sort of mix together in the dirt, making it insanely frustrating to try and identify them when they're just tiny little seedlings.
Section 5. Photography for AI identification. A modern twist on a traditional hobby. And that frustrating difficulty of identifying tiny seedlings? Well, that leads Ang to a massive shift in behavior. This is exactly where our explainer takes a sharp, super energetic turn into modern tech. Because of this pressing need for accurate ID, Ang's entire approach to garden photography has completely changed. It's not just about snapping a pretty picture of a bloom anymore. It's a replicable tutorial now. Step 1, don't just focus on the flower or the overall plant. Step 2, you absolutely must take close-up shots of both the flowers and the leaves. It's a totally new, highly methodical way of documenting the garden. So, the crucial point here is the why. Why go through the trouble of changing your photography style just to include a bunch of leaves? Well, as Eng explicitly points out, capturing the leaves, those very specific trifoliate ovate leaves we talked about earlier, is incredibly critical. It helps immensely with accurate identification through AI. By feeding artificial intelligence these highly detailed close-ups of the foliage, the AI gets the exact structural data it needs to tell you precisely what is sprouting in your soil. We've essentially connected this microtask of photographing a single leaf to the massive macro-level utility of artificial intelligence. It's brilliant. Which brings us to the end of our journey today, and it leaves us with a rather profound concept to ponder. We started with a wild collected lavender sorrel just sitting quietly in a pot, and we ended up leveraging advanced AI for botanical identification. It really forces us to ask, how will AI change the way you look at the plants in your own backyard? Are you going to start looking past those bright, flashy blooms, actively seeking out the tiny structural details of leaves, knowing your smartphone's AI needs that exact data? It's such a fascinating intersection of nature and technology. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep observing the world around you, and I will catch you next time.